Hi, folks. It's Pia from the Koalas. Today's session is about refinement. So, refinement of basically any backlog item. But what does refinement mean? And how do we, the Koalas, experience refinements in our daily work? Does a story really have to have all the information before the refinement? Why do we estimate? And how important is the definition of ready for us? And what about the testability of an item? Join me in the discussion I had about this with Rodrigo and Andy the other day. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our series where we go through the whole development life cycle and where quality assurance and testing fits in. So as we're recording this in super hot summer 2022, we decided to go for skiing to cool a little bit down before our discussion maybe heats up a little bit. Let's see where we go. Today, our topic is refinement. And as usual, I'm here with my colleagues, Rodrigo and Andy. And I would say, yeah, let's kick it off. And the first thing I'd like to dig into with you guys is we said already in our last sessions that a user story is like a promise for a conversation. So that means, and I think we agreed on that, it doesn't have to know everything, the story, but what does have, what does need to be included already before we go into the refinement, or when we now start with the refinement, when can we use it as a conversation starter? How negotiable is it? Things like we've been talking about in our last session when we talked about invest. So yeah, I'm keen to hear your thoughts, and maybe Andy, you would like to start.
Well, from my point of view, the creation of the story has already quite a lot of material in it to base the conversation on. We already touched the last time also on Tres Amigos principle, so that at least one of each of the rules is part of the story creation. And for me, it's just important that it is described what should be achieved by this story, what's the business value out of it, and what's not only the business value, but perhaps also additionally on that, what the user actually uses that feature for. And that's, for me, the starting point, and also the agreement we need to have within the refinement, that we actually understand the content of it, and not so much how it's then implemented. What do you think about that statement, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I've seen this happen far too many times. When you go into a refinement session and engineers will be engineers and they try to engage in problem solving right there and then. Sometimes it's fruitful, but people tend to get too excited about the details. So what I try to do personally is I try to focus just on the necessary amount of detail, so I'm able to estimate it. Like, what steps do I need to do? Do I need to involve like a UI UX designer to do something? How hard is it going to be to test it? What kind of test cases need to be worked on? What kind of backend development is going to need? Will we need to create a table? We need to just add a column, but we don't need to go into details. Which column, which data type? I think that's beyond the scope. But as long as we are clear on what the development tasks that are needed to be done to achieve the acceptance criteria, I think we have a very good starting point to estimate and then have that shared understanding, not only on the user story, like what is the outcome we're trying to reach, but also on how we're gonna reach it, even though it's not crystal clear yet. just enough to estimate. I think that's a good focus for refinement.
You both mentioned estimation, and I'm curious because there are different opinions on that out there. So should we estimate, or do you estimate usually during refinement, or is this something you do in planning? And if here or there, what's the reason to do it either in the refinement or in the planning? And also, I would be curious on your general thoughts about why we estimate stuff at all. We're agile. Do we really need estimations? I know there's a lot of questions, so you can pick the one you like most. And I think I hand it over to Rodrigo first.
Yeah, estimations. Personally, I like doing estimations, but I can understand not doing them as well. The thing is, in order to connect with the business side of things, they need to be able to have at least a rough guideline of what the product roadmap will be. And if we don't have estimations, that gets a little tricky. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm sure it is. We are creative people. We can figure something out. But it is hard. But specifically on the estimation, a problem that I see very often, and I've done it as well, and I'm pretty sure every developer has done it sometime, is when we estimate, we try to come up with time. It doesn't matter if we're using t-shirt sizes or just Fibonacci series. It's like, yeah, sure, 3 points is 2 or 3 days. And I think that defeats the purpose of the estimation, because we're trying to get precise with estimations, which is an oxymoron. Then to me, my preferred way of doing estimations is by comparison, right? So I implemented an endpoint that was 3 points. I need to implement a new endpoint that doesn't have any fancy business logic. So sure, this one is 3 points as well. I would do it like that. Because let's say my team gains seniority, right? Then what was 3 points a year ago, now it's just 1 point because we're badass developers, we can do it much quicker. And then it's like, yeah, now you're losing a little bit of the metrics, or I don't know, it just feels weird to me. What do you think, Andy? What is your favorite approach?
I think, to be honest, I really love to make estimation for various points. The first, though, is to have like one set where you can finally say, okay, we have a similar understanding. What I mean with that, there are a lot of different estimation techniques and points, but let's say we do Fibonacci and we have just 5s and 8s, which are close together, right? That's fine for me. We have kind of the similar understanding. But if we have a 2 and a 13, we might have a mismatch in the understanding what we need to do. And for me, within the team, that's the main benefit for me for doing estimations. The added benefit of it is when we take the assumption, and I really love to do that, to say, okay, we know the system, and we take the assumption that we are equally good. Every team member is equally good, and we know exactly what we need to do and what we need to change. Because from that mindset on, you don't change numbers as you described, right? You don't say, okay, today is a 3 and next year is probably a 2. So you avoid that. And with that avoiding, you actually see with the capacity, the sprint velocity, you can actually track your progress as a team, how you develop and how you increase or being more efficient with the changes you did from retrospectives and which impact they have, right? That's an added point. However, it can also be misused. What you also actually said about the estimation is, I want to bring in another point. I don't say, okay, 3 points is like 3 days. You can think around and make a structure like reference stories, but more abstract. And you say, okay, adjusting a label, it's like 1 point. Perhaps not only having the label adjusted, but have some logic, there are 2 points, and so on and so on. So you have those relative qualifiers for the individual points. And with that, you make sure that you don't swap it or change it up or do stuff, right? And the second question you have, one of the questions, sorry, it's not the second question, Pia. One of the other questions was like, do you estimate at all? And what does it bring? And when do you estimate? I saw a lot of people having separate meetings for refinements and estimations and story creations. And in the past, I really loved to have the estimation part in the refinement session together. And this very simple point is that otherwise, when you have those big discrepancies in the estimation part and you need to jump over again and need to make that cycle again, you have that delayed, like this time you have lost because you need to pick it up in the next refinement session again because you changed the story, right? And I really love to have that as part of the refinement. And I dare also, what I think is very important, sorry, I drag it a bit long and give it quickly back to you, that everyone is prepared and that you time box individual stories for like 10 minutes. Everyone is prepared. And if it exceeds those 10 minutes, then the story is not ready and we can move on and have another look in another time.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think you mentioned a lot of very interesting points. Also, like when we look at the estimation, can we like sum it up for, okay, we estimate to see, are we confident? Do we have enough information to estimate? Do we have a common understanding? Or is it like one team member says 2 points and the others say like 13? So do we have a big gap there? So those would be, I agree with both of you, those would be like red flags where we say, okay, it's not good enough to estimate. We need to review that story again. So that's one thing. I think we can like say, okay, we estimate for basically see, is it good enough? Can we get started? Do we have a common understanding in the team? And the other thing is, I don't remember exactly your wording right now, but what I wanted to pick up, because I think it fits quite good in here, is a definition of ready. So like looking at the story or a certain like task we wanna get started after our planning then, which we talk about more in detail in our next session, but in general, like a definition of ready. What's your experience with that? Is it like before you take a story into the refinement, like a definition of ready needs to be fulfilled already, or is it your goal to have it fulfilled after the refinement? So what's your experience and what are your thoughts there? And I see already Andy's brain is working. So I would give it to you first.
Yeah, for me, I mean, definition of ready, I really like, but with those theoretical quality gates, I think it's really up to the team how mature it is and how the situation within the team is. But to answer your question very brief, I want to come back to the Tres Amigos meeting we talked about last time. For me, when the story comes to a refinement and it went off from this Tres Amigos meeting and it was created, a very good initial point is, from my experience, when all of those 3 people have the same understanding of the story, that's a very good baseline. When all those people have gave the input, for example, the QA person, yeah, but did you thought about test data related to this new use case? Can we then actually test it? Or the architect or replacement deputy of him says, yeah, but for that we need an entirely new service, and this also needs to be handed over to the refinement. I think when all those questions are asked, we have a very good baseline to go into the refinement session. But that just needs to happen, right? Those three people should talk together, create a story, and then take it into the refinement. That's for me the definition of ready for the refinement. And the actual definition of ready, we all talk about in the industry, should be met after the refinement session concluded with the whole team.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's great if we get to a refinement and we have stories that meet the definition of ready, but I don't think of that as a requirement. That's why it's called a refinement, right? We are there to refine so that we know exactly, or at least enough to get productive with it.
Sorry when I cut
please.
in here. I just have just to make that the right way, the intention behind having a Tres Amigos and preparing already the story for the refinement is that all those people in the refinement session don't need to care anymore about the very details and the fundamental discussion, right? Because I saw a lot that the story was just created by, I'd say now, an architect, and the story came into the refinement session, and then 10 people were in the call, but just the architect and the PO discussed with each other. The time was summed up. 8 people were useless there and cost money, but didn't deliver value, right? So that's the reason why I think it's so crucial to have those discussions. But yeah, sure, it's not required. It's just optimization.
Yeah, another aspect that I think it's the refinement brings value. It's a little on the human side of things, right? Because if the architect and the product owner, they work around inside their tower and they make plans, schemes, and decisions, and then they just rain from the sky all their knowledge into the lowly developers and say, here's the plan, this is what needs to be done, now you go and do it. So this does not stimulate developers to feel ownership over their work, and that directly affects quality, engagement, turnover. So this is also something to consider. Every developer is smart, right? So I'm pretty sure they will have something to say about pretty much any problem. Even if it's completely wrong, they will have something to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, both guys. Last thing I'd like to tackle in a refinement. Last time when talking about Invest, we talked about stories should be testable. So in the refinement, would you agree that that's the latest point where we should think about, is our story testable? What do you think, Rodrigo?
Absolutely. That's the first thing I look for. It's before I read however long it may be, the first thing I gaze upon is the acceptance criteria. I take a look at it and say, okay, is it clear enough? It doesn't have to be crystal clear, obviously, and is it testable? So those are the first 2 questions I ask. If they meet, they say, if it's yes to those 2 questions, then okay, let's dig in and see what's about.
I love it. I think we should, I don't know, put that somewhere down in some written format and blinking in green lights or yellow lights, something like that. I think everybody should follow what you just described. I would make the life of everybody in the IT sector much easier, I would say.
Yeah, and to add to that, I've seen product owners or product managers like investing a lot of time writing details on a user story, and then it's like, yeah, but I'm not going to read what's up there if the acceptance criteria is not good enough, not testable. So
yeah, absolutely. Andy, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I completely agree. I don't really have anything more to add anyway, just more the direction of how could that be described or visualized in a easy way, right? And for me, always the dream is to already have certain test cases in the story, or certain scenarios that the developers should keep in mind of when he or she took care of the story and then verify their work, because I still hope people do that. Probably we talk about that in the future, in a future talk as well. But for me, I think also BDD and Gherkin is a very easy and cool tool to already bring that in on story level, to have a Gherkin syntax regarding test cases or business flows, to describe business flows. I think that's very, very easy and approachable tool for all of the involved people, and actually can also then be used to talk or have discussions with the business. And at the end of the life cycle, also when there are perhaps bugs coming up and stuff, then it could be also very easily referred to it and clarified perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree to that. And I would say that's let's sum it up. So for the refinement, I mean, basically for the three of us, what's most important is like exactly that discussion. So like whether it's a story or anything else that comes into a refinement, it's like an invitation for a conversation and see, okay, are we as a team are aligned? Do we have a common understanding? Are we confident? Can we estimate that story or whatever? Whatever the item is. And yeah, and then so we are prepared and ready for the next step, which usually is the planning. And that's what we will be talking about in our next video. So stay tuned. Thank you.